Hello. Today is the day when 140 years ago Walter Gropius was born. So let's read a little bit about him. Walter Adolph Georg Gropius, born on the 18th of May, 1883, and today is the 18th of May by 2023, and died in July 1969, was a German-American architect and founder of the Bauhaus School, who, along with Alvar Aalto, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and Frank Lloyd Wright, is widely regarded as one of the pioneering masters of modernist architecture. He is a founder of Bauhaus in Weimar in 1919. Gropius was also a leading architect of the international style. This is what Wikipedia says, but the things are a little bit more complex. So the early career from 1908 to 1914. In 1908, after studying architecture in Munich and Berlin for 4 semesters, Gropius joined the office of the renowned architect and industrial designer Peter Behrens, one of the first members of the utilitarian school. I don't agree with this wording, and sorry about this, but that's what I took from Wikipedia. His fellow employees at this time included Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, and Dietrich Marx. So they worked for Peter Behrens, and Gropius joined the office of Peter Behrens in 1908. In 1910, Gropius left the firm of Behrens and together with fellow employee Adolph Meyer, established a practice in Berlin. Together, they share credit for one of the pioneering modernist buildings created during this period, the Fagusberg in Alfeld an der Leine, in Germany, a shoe last factory. I think this English is a little bit problematic. Anyway, I continue. Although Gropius and Meyer only designed the facade, the glass curtain walls of this building demonstrated both the modernist principle that form reflects function and Gropius' concern with providing healthful conditions for the working class. Other works of this early period include the office and factory building for the Werkbund exhibition in Cologne, in Köln, in Germany, in 1914. Unfortunately, they were destroyed in a few months because the First World War started. In 1913, Gropius published an article about the development of industrial buildings, which included about 12 photographs of factories and grain elevators in North America. A very influential text, this article had a strong influence on other European modernists, including Le Corbusier and Erich Mendelsohn, both of whom reprinted Gropius' grain elevator pictures between 1920 and 1930. Gropius' career was interrupted by the outbreak of World War I in 1914. He was drafted in August 1914 and served as a Sergeant Major at the Western Front during the war years, getting wounded and almost killed, and then as a lieutenant in the Signal Corps. Gropius was awarded the Iron Cross twice when it still meant something, he confided to his friend Chester Nagel. After fighting for 4 years, Gropius then, like his father and his great-uncle Martin Gropius before him, became an architect. Well, became an architect with only 4 semesters of schooling. This was the man. And he was married first with a remarkable lady who previously was married to Gustav Mahler, Alma Mahler. Now, I don't know if this is her, but anyway, Alma Mahler, a very interesting lady indeed. She was, anyway, she could be a subject for a movie just by herself. Here he is in older days when he built an apartment building in Berlin, which we are going to see in the 1950s. Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius with his proposal for the Chicago Tribune competition behind. Walter Gropius. Walter Gropius. Some drawings. I read that he always worked with another architect who drew because he didn't. Yes, apparently Walter Gropius either was reluctant to draw or he couldn't draw. And I read that most of the time, if not always, he worked with another architect who made the drawings, but Walter Gropius didn't. Now, the Gropius, so-called Gropius drawings of the Bauhaus School in 1926 in Dessau, somebody did these drawings for him. I can't imagine Gropius doing these drawings, especially after we learned that he didn't enjoy drawing too much. It's also interesting to contemplate the fact that, an architect cannot draw. But there are such cases. Some important architects who didn't draw. Not everybody enjoys drawing or knows how to draw. Anyway, competition entry for the Palace of the Soviets in Moscow, 1931. Again, I don't know who did this rendering, but I imagine it was not by him, considering what we just read. House am Horn, 1923. This actually was not by him. It was by another professor at the Bauhaus. I don't know why this is included in the biography of Walter Gropius. It shouldn't. Submission for the Palace of the Soviets competition. Yes, this was his work, his project, 1931. Again, I don't know who did the drawing. Now, a project for a total theater from 1927, also Walter Gropius. A rather, conceptually futuristic building, but it appears in many books about theater design or the architecture of theaters. Now, the Fungus Factory, which we read about from 1910, 1911, truly remarkable work, even if they worked only on the, the envelope of the building, the facades. But I think, and he worked with Adolph Meyer, I think with good reasons, this building as it is, as we look at it now, does belong to the history of modern architecture. No question about it. Walter Gropius, 1910, 1911, so 8 years before he founded the Bauhaus. I mean, you look at the building on the right and you look at the building on the left and you see clearly a difference, no? This is a modern architecture. What we see here is not. The Fungus Factory, and look at these windows, impeccably, designed and functioning accordingly. A fine work, a very fine work. In my opinion, what he built early is often more interesting and more valid architecturally than what he built later, particularly in his later years in the United States. We are going to see those works. This is also a very important work which he did for the Werkbund exhibition in Köln in Germany in 1914, but it was demolished. Is, look at this remarkable staircase, but the whole building is very interesting, and unfortunately it was demolished a few months after it was built because the First World War started. So 1914, the Werkbund exhibition in Cologne or Köln in Germany. I think he worked here also with Adolph Meyer. because we know by now that he always worked with another architect. Well, after he crossed the ocean, he worked with Marcel Breuer for a while, and then he opened his own office, Architects Collaborative, and so on. But this is also, I think, a remarkable project, and I continue to think that what he did in those years was, in general, more interesting than what he built later. I mean, look at this staircase. It's almost visionary, considering that it was built in 1914. Monument to the March Dead with Alfred Forbat, 1920-1922. This is expressionism. So the founder at that time in 1920-1922, the Bauhaus already started. It started in 1919. And he did this, as I said, at the beginning, the Bauhaus was had different spirit than what it became later on. And this connected also with his own work. As you can see, this monument built, not just projected in 1920, 1922, no? Yes, 1920, 1922 is expressionistic, very sculptural. Well, it is a sculpture, but it's a monument. He gave up, actually, this kind of work later on. It would have been interesting if Walter Gropius, maybe he would not have had the same success, but it would have been interesting if Walter Gropius would have continued to produce works in, you know, in this way. We remember that he founded the Bauhaus in 1919. Now that bench there was obviously not designed by Walter Gropius. Let's not have wrong ideas here. You see, the sculpture is still very, very moving aesthetically for us today, as it was probably then, 100 years ago. I see a connection between this monument and the manifest for the Bauhaus that he wrote, which ends with the word faith, and which talks about exaltation, that exaltation that transforms a craftsman into an artist, the longing for the above. Now, this is a very interesting house. From 1921, and you wouldn't expect the founder of the Bauhaus to build something like this, because for most of us, Bauhaus was a school that promoted, democratic, luminous, technologically explicit form of design and architecture as well. But in 1921, 2 years after he founded the Bauhaus, look what he designed. People who do not know the history of architecture, the works of and the evolution of Walter Gropius, I'm almost sure would not have imagined or would not imagine that this building was designed by the founder of the Bauhaus. But the Bauhaus itself was a different kind of art architecture school at the beginning than the one that it became later. Look, who would have said that this is a house built by the founder of the Bauhaus? Look, stained glass windows. And it was built after the founding of the Bauhaus. Look at the interior. But this is how Walter Gropius was in those years. So let's look again. 1921, 2 years after the Bauhaus was founded. Again, who would have imagined this kind of heavy decoration or ornamentation, in the architect, in a strange way, perhaps. The founder of the Bauhaus, a few years later, in his works for Dessau, for the School of Architecture, for the School of the Bauhaus, gave up exactly this meeting between the arts under the cupola of architecture, if we are to express ourselves so. Look, even graphically, this is an expressionistic drawing. Now, we see something happened then between 1921 and 1922. So the house we just looked at was done in 1921. Look at this. But look in 1922, 1 year later, at the project for the Chicago Tribune Tower. How do you explain it? What does this building have in common with this one? Nothing. Nothing. So how could it be that the same architect who designed this in 1921 designed this 1 year later? Probably there are books about this. I don't know, but it is intriguing, perplexing even. Now here we see on the left is the tower that won, Raymond Hood, and this is by Gropius, and there are a few others. This is probably by Saarinen. I don't know the other two, but this is by Gropius. The most, in a way, democratic and so-called modern. Here we see others. So this was a very famous architectural competition for the Chicago Tribune Tower. It was won by Raymond Hood with this, Gothicist structure. And here we have the famous tower by Adolph Loos, with an explicit column, something, a reference to the column of a newspaper or the columns of a newspaper. And here is Walter Gropius. I don't know who designed this one, but Raymond Hood, Adolph Loos, Walter Gropius. Here he is, the dreamer. The Bauhaus School and houses for senior staff from 1925 to 1932. Well, this is the school itself. We already saw some in the previous presentation about the Bauhaus, some of the buildings. Here, maybe we see some echoes from, the Fagus factory, particularly the glass work, which I like actually, divided as it is in smaller parts. So these are built in Dessau based on the plans, the project of Walter Gropius. We know that the initial building in Weimar, the Bauhaus was located, that building was designed by Henry van der Velde. And here it is, here is the architecture, the old architecture of that area in 1920s in Germany. And this is these are the new buildings of the Dessau Bauhaus School. The villas of the masters, we saw already some pictures with them, explicitly modern, and dynamic. Actually, they are good buildings. The Gropius house is this one, where the founder of the school lived in Dessau. Beautiful trees around it. Vasily Kandinsky and Paul Klee share the same building. This is for Muche and Schlemmer, Oskar Schlemmer, two masters. They shared one building. Is this the building? And I think they are, remarkable buildings and, rather spacious, no? With two independent apartments or houses, although they are connected, but you can imagine two big houses for two masters. And now the one for Kandinsky and Klee is this one. It's like a dream in a way to think that Kandinsky, Vasily Kandinsky, and Paul Klee lived in this house, and shared. They had discussions. They had. I mean, this is very inspiring, to think, and in a beautiful landscape, trees and two great artists, both teaching at the Bauhaus. So the school was doing rather well when we think about it. But the truth is, the most important thing is the artistic quality of the faculty, meaning these professors. We are talking about major art forces of modernity, and these are some houses. I don't know for whom he built them. I don't think they are for students. It's an estate, a housing project or complex that Gropius built. Also in Dessau. Village College. Now, 1936. So the Bauhaus closed in 1933. Mies van der Rohe was at that time the director of the school. I don't know if it's true, but I read somewhere that apparently the students of the Bauhaus kicked out, so to speak, in a non-academic language, the founder himself, meaning Walter Gropius, because they were not taught history in the school. But I'm not sure that this is the truth, but that's what I read. Anyway, in 1936, the Bauhaus was over in Germany. In 1933, the school was closed. But in 1936, he moved first to England and then to the United States. So in England, together with Edwin Maxwell Fry, himself an important architect, built this village college in Picton, in Cambridge. I don't know exactly what he built here. Maybe this part. I don't know if the whole building. Anyway, we are now dealing with Walter Gropius on his way towards the United States with an intermezzo period in England. The Village College. Now, Old Church Street in Chelsea, London, 1936, 1966. I don't know exactly what this building is, maybe housing. Also in Great Britain. The Gropius House, now in 1937, apparently around that time, 1936, 1937, 3-4 years after the Bauhaus was shut down, he finally arrived in Massachusetts in the United States, and he became the director of the Harvard Graduate School of Design in 1937. And this is the school he built, the house he built for himself in Massachusetts, in the United States. Walter Gropius. He lived well, of course. I mean, he was the director of the School of Architecture at Harvard, and what can we say? It helped him, of course, being the founder of the Bauhaus, the famous Bauhaus. While in the United States, the Bauhaus found a new home in Chicago, and that school was directed by Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. Anyway, we are looking at some pictures from the inside the house that Gropius built for himself in Massachusetts, in the United States. Long lived modernity. Did he work at this long working table? Probably. Although we know he didn't like to draw. Now, this house that he built with Marcel Breuer is a significant achievement in the field of modern houses. 1939, 1940, the Allen I.W. Frank House in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. As I said, he took Marcel Breuer with him across the ocean. And this is a house that received some admiration from Kenneth Frampton and others. Apparently, the involvement of Marcel Breuer was important. You know, this staircase has sophistications here. You know, you see here, it's a book published by Rizzoli, and you see essays by Kenneth Frampton, Barry Bergdahl, and Charles Birnbaum. Allen I.W. Frank House, the modernist masterwork by Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer. Now, indeed, you look at this staircase, and it's very finely designed. Even the dog seems to enjoy being where it is. Nice dog. Some people live well, what can we say? Without thinking about the climate change and other things we have to think of these days. So this was, you know, 1939, 1940 in the United States. Look at this stair, also itself remarkable. Even, you know, hidden a little bit by snow. Walter Gropius and Marcel Breuer. Now, the Harvard Graduate Center at Cambridge, Massachusetts, working with his own office called the Architects Collaborative from 1949-1950. So the Second World War ended. And this is in my opinion, his work became a little bit less interesting after he started to work with what he called the Architects Collaborative. From my point of view, I don't find it as enticing as one would expect from you know, a great master like Walter Gropius. Maybe that's why the Wikipedia presents him as a, you know, a master of the international style. It's not really the international style, but this kind of architecture doesn't, you know, surprise us a lot. Maybe he considered this a virtue, you know, to do a work which is not, you know, highly surprising. Not that it doesn't have quality, it does, but it is a little bit, I don't know, when you think about the other masters of the modern movement, you know, like Le Corbusier or Mies, or to speak about, you know, like Alvar Aalto. And, at the University of Baghdad from 1957 to 1960, This is the mosque he designed, but I don't know if it was built. Maybe it was. Yes, it was. But I find it a little bit almost burlesque. Sorry, Walter Gropius. I know it's your birthday today, 140th birthday. But I'm not very impressed by this mosque for some reason. I don't know. It's I don't know how to describe it. I didn't have a personal meeting with this building, but it's in a way too explicitly a mosque, and something seems to be missing. Maybe because it is not quite in the best shape. But even when I look at the project, I find it a little bit rhetorical and a little bit burlesque, as I said. This is my opinion from what I see here, without a direct experience. The main gate of the University of Baghdad, which was designed by Gropius and the architects collaborative, his office, I also find it rather rhetorical and surprising when you think about the founder of the Bauhaus. It's not a radical architecture. It's not even, explicitly modern. It's rather conventional, I would say. And here he is. I guess that's him with this gate. But it's so, in a way, predictable. This gate is something is missing. And please remember the early works by him, like that monument he built in 1920, 1921. Then even that house that he built in 1919, I think, or around that time. And this gate is it's too predictable somehow. It's too sorry about this. I don't know what this is. He built a tower, but where did he build it? Why is it that I do not have the? I think it's also in Baghdad. Maybe part of the university in Iraq, in Baghdad. I hope the armed forces of the United States and England didn't bomb it when the war in Iraq took place. Another anomaly, and another abnormality, and another abominable war. 1963, 1966, the John F. Kennedy Federal Office Building in Boston is this. Well, why not? But I mean, it is well designed, but I don't know why I'm not very impressed. The works he did in the works he did, with the exception of that villa where he worked together with Marcel Breuer. Actually, I appreciate more the works of Marcel Breuer than the works of Walter Gropius in the United States. Junior high school, 1948. I don't know exactly. I mean, I think this was transformed in the postmodern years. I cannot imagine that Walter Gropius designed it exactly like this in 1960, 1948. No, I don't think so. Anyway, moving forward, now a house. It was designed by the Architects Collaborative, which was his office, practically, 1957, 1959. This one, decent modernism, optimistic, as a lot of architecture of that time was. The war was won, and the United States was doing well, and the people were building such houses. Mid-century modernism all over the country. Yes, but not, I wouldn't say highly original. Now the Panam building, which now is the MetLife building, The Panam was an airline company which is out of business now. 1958, 1963, he worked with Pietro Belluschi and project architects Emery Roth and Sons. This is a famous tall building, not to say skyscraper in Manhattan. So it's called now MetLife, but previously had the words changed. The Panam, this was the Panam building. Walter Gropius was involved in this design, but as we read, there were other people here like Pietro Belluschi and the project architects Emery Roth and Sons. Not far away from Chrysler building, as you can see, Manhattan, New York City. Here you see the picture from the time when the building belonged to Panam. Interbau apartment blocks. Now, in Berlin had the wisdom 3 times during the 20th century to invite some of the most important architects to build apartment buildings and even houses in 3 different distinct periods during the 20th century. In the 1930s, in the 1950s, and in the 1980s. And this was from the 1950s. He built this Interbau apartment block. Now it's called the Walter Gropius House in Berlin. And he worked with architects collaborative and Will Sebert, I guess a local, an architect from Berlin or from Germany. And this is the apartment building, and it's not a bad building. It's a block of flats. It has a certain verb. It has a color. It has a curvature. It works, but it's not as radical as, for example, l'unité d'habitation by Le Corbusier, because Le Corbusier also built the 4th and last unité d'habitation, if I am to call it in French, in Berlin. It was also part of this Interbau. And around it, there are very interesting buildings by Bakema, by even Oscar Niemeyer, very interesting buildings, because again, Berlin had this wisdom to invite very important architects to build houses and apartment buildings. 3 years, three different periods during the 20th century. This is the building seen from the back, I guess from the north, where the staircases are. I hope I have a plan here. Yes, here is the plan. So this was from 1957, Walter Gropius. South, and we see at north there are the staircases and the elevators. Now, Temple, Oheb Shalom in Baltimore, Maryland from 1960, and this reminds me of that gate he built in Baghdad. And again, I'm surprised actually to see this building, a little bit surprised to see this building from the founder of the Bauhaus. If it was built by, let's say, Philip Johnson, I would have accepted with more ease. But from Walter Gropius, so I guess he also had a conventional side somehow. Or I don't know. I'm a little bit puzzled. And what's going on here? I mean, these arches here, I find them a little bit too convenient. Maybe his life in the United States was too successful and too easy. I remember his early works, particularly that monument he built, expressionistic as it is. And now we see an architecture that is the Gropiusstadt building complex in Berlin, 1960. It is, indeed a Stadt, a city in itself almost. A large number of people being housed in these apartment buildings. Is it a remarkable architecture? I'm not so sure. But then, maybe we can discuss what does it mean remarkable. Let's not forget that the Bauhaus, after the departure of Gropius, had as a second director of the school, Hans Meyer, who was himself, he was a controversial figure because he was considered a communist, and that's why he lost his directorship after 3 years. But his architecture was also devoid of spectacular elements. And I would say that this architecture by Gropius also is not, alarmingly, artistic or sculptural or, even intriguing. It's a rather social architectural gesture. The award-winning Wayland High School in Wayland, Massachusetts, 1961. It was demolished, I think, or I don't know what's going on here. Yeah, Embassy of the United States in Athens, in Greece, the Architects Collaborative, his office, and consulting architects Pericles, obviously Greek architect, from there, from Athens. So the Embassy of the United States. Now, embassies are difficult in a way for those who are whose minds are like umbrellas, meaning they work best when they are open, referring to a quotation from Walter Gropius. This is the building. It's indeed it's indeed an embassy, maybe too much so, maybe too explicitly so. I don't know what to say about this building. Although Frank Lloyd Wright admired the not much different building by Edward Stone, also kind of in this spirit. I like the cars though, but the cars are not designed by Walter Gropius. Greece. But it's a building without that spirit of newness that the Bauhaus had, and not even the mystical, spirit of its beginnings. It's an institutional building of a powerful country in a less powerful country, financially or so, but with a great culture. Athens, Greece. Who knows? Maybe in its proximity, one would change the perception. I don't know. I don't find it. I'm even surprised, But it has been said that the revolutionaries become conformists sometimes. He was a revolutionary at the beginning, but I'm not so sure he is here. And maybe it was not the place to be a revolutionary any longer, designing the embassy of the United States in Greece. Now, this work, and I should have checked before I started the presentation, I'm not sure exactly what he did here, because it doesn't look like his work. The glass cathedral, I think there was some kind of a another building, or I don't know what's going on. It's actually very intriguing, and I should check again or double check, because we see the Glassberg in Amberg, but this doesn't look like a Gropius building. I'm confused. I don't know exactly what he did here. Maybe he transformed a building that was built for a certain function into something else. Is it a cathedral? I'm sorry, I do not know what's happening here. It's an interesting work, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he did here, because it doesn't look like a Gropius building from that period in his life, the 1960s. Now, when was it built? 1968, and it's called Glass Cathedral. But here we see Glassberg. It might be that this information that I have here on this presentation is not quite correct, but this is what I found on the web. I have to double check. I'm puzzled. Anyway, moving forward, a tower in Shaker Heights, Ohio, was Gropius' last major project. Now, I took this wording from somewhere on the web, and from my study of English, the English language. When you have an S, you don't add another S here. One was enough. The termination of the name Gropius. But I found this mistake. I consider it a mistake very often. So this is a tower that he built in Shaker Heights, Ohio, 1967, 1968, meaning in the United States. But again, this building leaves me cold. I refuse to accept that this building was built by the founder of the Bauhaus. No, something happened to Walter Gropius, really. He was a changed man at that time, and I don't think it was because of his age, because because Frank Lloyd Wright was older than him, and he would still innovate and create sometimes alarming new buildings like the Guggenheim Museum. But this is very conventional. I'm sorry, Walter Gropius. I'm surprised you built this. It could have been built by any architect. It didn't have to be by the founder of the famous Bauhaus. Now, what is this? Huntington Museum of Art in West Virginia. Original building expanded with Gropius addition with little alteration to the original structure. Only American Art Museum to be brought to completion using a Gropius design. But even here, I think he only did some things, because I think this was an existing building and he added something, which probably this part. 1968, 1970. We are approaching the end of this presentation. Yeah, this existed. This was not built by Gropius. He built the pavilions, or the building on the right side in the picture. Even this one doesn't move me a lot. And this is, I think, yeah, this was built after he died. It is one of the largest holiday resorts in Europe. 1973, 1980, Porto Caras in Greece. And it is indeed a large holiday resort. Look at this. Now, what does this have to do with the Bauhaus? What does this have to do with the Bauhaus Manifesto that he wrote in 1919? What does this have to do with that quest for an exalted architecture, crystalline expression of a new face? Nothing. There is all evidence that Walter Gropius was a changed man. Now, this was built after he died, but it was built on his designs. But this is a commercial building through and through. Gone is the exaltation that he talked about at the beginning of his career. Gone is the expressionism. Gone is the meeting with Vasily Kandinsky and Paul Klee and Johannes Itten, Oskar Schlemmer. Here is pure commerce. Maybe a correct building, but even the function, a resort. Something happened to Walter Gropius. This is my opinion. Something happened to him. Something was lost, in my opinion. That radical desire to change the world, in my opinion, is gone in such a work. And not the only one. We also saw that building in Ohio and a few others. Was it a tragic change? Maybe to an extent. At least Le Corbusier, provoked us until the end. He built Le Cabanon, and Frank Lloyd Wright also. I mentioned just the Guggenheim, but I could mention other buildings by him done when he was over 80. Something happened to Walter Gropius. Maybe he became too happy with his life in the United States and became, in my opinion, a little bit complacent. But let's wish him happy birthday anyway, on his 140th birthday. Today, the 18th of May, 2023. Thank you.